Welcome back to Race Report, everyone. And that is the Azerbaijan 2021 Grand Prix done for this year. And boy, wasn't it different to Monaco. Last time out in Monaco, we had a fairly boring race. Very processional, not even a yellow flag to speak about. Straight into Baku here, and we had red flags in qualifying, red flags in the race, incidents galore. So let's get stuck straight in. We'll start off with qualifying, and we had back-to-back pole positions for Ferrari. Fantastic. I did not predict that at the start of this year. I'm so glad it's happening. We did, however, have 4 red flags, which equals the record for the most red flags in a session, which is a bit of a shame. I feel like that ruined the flow of qualifying. Like, nobody was really, I didn't get a good feel for people's laps because it was so stop-start. And also, we had Q3 end on a red flag again for the second race in a row. I really hope that doesn't become like a prevalent problem, because it just takes away some of the magic of qualifying for me, that. When it came to the race, we had a great starting grid. There's a good mix of tyre uses, which I always love to see because it means we're going to have different strategies, different pit stop times, stuff like that. We had people starting out of position. So, for instance, Stroll and Giovinazzi were at the back because of their instance. We had Bottas down in 10th. We had Ricciardo even lower than that. So we knew that there would be moves up and down the field. And Baku is a good track for overtaking with that massive long straight and a lot of corners where you can actually squeeze 2 cars side by side, unlike other places we've been to so far this season, eh? We had a good start at the front of the grid. Not too many movements. Perez did manage to pick up 2 places, which put himself right behind his teammate Verstappen. Very critical for Red Bull strategy. That's brilliant. Norris did drop down to 12th, which was a bit disappointing considering he'd already been penalised for red flag infringement, making him even lower than where he qualified. But the massive winners were 2 of those out of place guys, Giovinazzi and Stroll, just making up places from the back. Stroll actually had a really interesting strategy. He started on the hard tyres, so we knew he was going to go very long into the race. So making up those places at the start, very critical for him. Then we saw some interesting things happening with Russell come in on lap 1 to strap on hard tyres. Giovinazzi did the same on lap 2. I think what they were going to try and do is go the whole race distance on those tyres, but that changed for reasons we'll come to in a short while. Hamilton did take the lead of the race from Leclerc on lap 2. Leclerc just really didn't have the race pace to compete with Hamilton or Verstappen. Verstappen did jump him eventually as well. Bit of a shame, as you know, you'd love to see Ferrari competing with those 2 teams, but it is very much, I think, a case of Mercedes and Red Bull are out on their own and Ferrari are competing with McLaren. However, I don't know where Ferrari have got this qualifying pace from. Brilliant to see though. And then came our different pit strategies that I mentioned to earlier. Some people would come in early, like I mentioned with Russell coming on lap 1 for hard tyres. So it wasn't everybody diving into the pits at the same time to try and undercuts or anything like that, but there were just some good moves up and down. Critically, Hamilton had a slow stop when he came in, as he had to be held up for another car coming down the pit lane. So that allowed Verstappen and Perez, even though Perez had a slow stop himself, to jump Hamilton at the pit stops. So at this point, Verstappen first, Perez second, Hamilton third. That wasn't actually the case out on track as Vettel was leading, which again, brilliant story. Vettel leading a Grand Prix in an Aston Martin, but he had to stop, so he's out of position. Around that same time, Sainz had an off-track moment where he had to bail out and reverse back onto the track. That threw him all the way down the field, but he actually had a good recovery drive and managed to secure some points in the end. Vettel, though, from that position where he was leading, he managed to go super long on the soft tyres, which is brilliant, and managed to come back out ahead of where they'd expected. They were talking about like maybe 7th position for him, and he came out way above that. So that's brilliant. That was kind of the first half of the race and everything was settling down, but it's only around lap 31 where things started to get super detailed and interesting. We had a safety car come out on lap 31 after a big crash for Stroll. Massive crash. He had a tyre failure. I don't know whether it was down to the Pirelli tyre just blowing up, or debris. That's something obviously everybody's got to have to look into. But massive crash. Thankfully, he's fine. It was on the pit lane entry, so nobody could pit for new tyres straight away, sort of thing. You know how everybody usually comes in. So that kind of nullified the race for a little bit as we trundled around on the safety car. On the restart, I think Vettel and Sainz did the best. They just both were on it straight away. Sainz obviously recovering from his earlier off track moment. Bottas had a terrible restart. I think he'd lost 3 places at the restart. It was crazy. And that means he was out of the points at that point as well. And then again, just as things are settling down, we're coming into the final stretch of the race. Lap 47 of 51. Massive tyre failure for Max Verstappen in the lead of the race. Massive tyre failure. Again, don't know if it's debris, don't know if it's the tyres, but it's not a coincidence that it was the same tyre on both Stroll and Verstappen's car on the same straight, which meant we had a quick safety car for a couple of laps and then they red flagged the race. And it was very interesting how they red flagged the race, because we heard a Red Bull radio to race director Michael Massey. I love that we're getting these radio calls to Michael Massey now. And Red Bull explained that they had no warning of the tyre failure and that they themselves recommended a red flag despite it working against their interests, because, we could have finished the race under that safety car. Perez would have won. So it's completely against Red Bull's interest. But they said, in the interest of safety, let's get the cars red flagged so everybody can change their tyres. Which is very interesting, because that clearly means that they think there was a tyre build issue, and that in the interest of safety, everybody should get off these hard tyres that they'd been racing with for, I think, 30 plus laps at that point, right? There was even some cars, like I mentioned earlier, Russell pitted on lap 1 for hard tyres, and Pirelli even said you can do the whole race on the hard tyres. The distance should be fine. So if Russell had tried from lap 1 on those hard tyres to go the race distance, God knows what would have happened to him as well. We did see more messages to Michael Massey as well. Again, I just love that we're getting that insight behind the scenes into these things. We heard McLaren call him up and say, hey, Tsunoda has been speeding under double yellows. And he came back quite firm there and said, as far as I can tell, you're all speeding under double yellows. Yeah, I'm going to have a chat with the drivers at the next drivers briefing, because I think you're all going way too fast. So if I penalise him, I'm penalising everybody. Oh, okay. Pretty strong take on it, but cool. It's just nice to hear that behind the scenes stuff. Then we entered this, will they restart it, won't they restart it phase? Because I mean, if we restarted, there was only going to be 2 laps. They did restart it in the end. Standing start with everybody on new tyres, 2 laps remaining. Oh, it'll be a sprint to the end, and it was brilliant. So we had Perez in first, Hamilton in second, Vettel in third. Man, Vettel, what a race. And the drama wasn't done there. Obviously, these 2 laps were going to be amazing. Everybody was going to be fighting it all out. And we only had to wait until the first corner before more drama, with Hamilton locking up and going off track at the restart on the very first corner. It looked like he'd actually taken the place. I was sure he was going to get into that first corner ahead of Perez. But he went off, dropped to the back of the grid, and that was his race done. After the race, it came out that he had what they call brake magic on, which is a brake warm-up that they provide under the safety car. It's something he turned off on the grid, but accidentally hit on again as he upshifted on the restart, which obviously completely threw off his braking, which is why he locked up into the first corner. A massive mistake. Huge mistake. And he'd literally just been talking about how this is a marathon, not a sprint. Let's not do anything stupid. Then that happened. That's got to be crushing for him and the team. But after that, the top 3 didn't really change. There was fighting up and down the field. It was very entertaining. Obviously, everybody trying to make their moves as best as they could. I think Alonso was one of the big winners out of that gang. And there was a really entertaining fight for third place between Gasly, Leclerc, and Norris was kind of in there as well. He's kind of hunting around to see if he could pick up anything. But in the end, Perez came home in first, Vettel came home in second, and Pierre Gasly comes home in third. What a top three. And what an entertaining race in the end. Perez, I will say, drove superbly. He obviously didn't qualify that well, but he came through the field as he's done practically at every race so far this season. And he finished so well, and he's well deserving of his second win. Although Verstappen, you would say, would have easily taken the win if his tyre didn't fail, but Perez was on it all race. And then you had Vettel, who did that super good stint, looking back retroactively now, going that long on the soft tyres when we know the hard tyres were failing. Man, that was, super good. Like, he must have looked after those really, really well. And the fact that he pulled out the first podium for Aston Martin, brilliant. That's fantastic. And it did genuinely look like Sebastian Vettel of, early Ferrari days and Red Bull before that. It wasn't the Sebastian Vettel we've been seeing for the last couple of years. Then Pierre Gasly comes home. He had quite an anonymous race, I guess. He was just kind of like floating around in like 4th or 5th for a while. Just kind of anonymously getting on with his job, really. And then, very much like Pierre Gasly does, as soon as a opportunity presents itself, for instance, with Verstappen going out and then Hamilton going out, it's like, boom, he's there. He's right there. 3rd place. Brilliant. And another podium for AlphaTauri, which is great for them because they had a Ferrari and a McLaren behind them, challenging them, and they managed to hold them off, which is great. Great racing. One thing that I do think will need to be looked at in this race and will be talked about for a while after this race is those tyres. Like, why did they take these softer compound tyres to this race? What about that build was causing them to fail? I think there will be a lot of questions surrounding that. A bit like, I don't know if anybody remembers the British Grand Prix a couple of years ago. We had a good couple of tyre failures there at high speed as well. After that race, there was proper reforms about, how do we go about making these tyres harder? How do we stop these tyre failures from happening? And then we had a good couple of years. And this is the first time I think we've had since then where that question's come back up again. So I wonder if people are going to go away and say like, hey, look, it's happened again. We need to talk about these tyres. Maybe it goes ahead and informs next year's tyres. Maybe for this year, they just go with harder compounds across the board. I don't know what's going to happen, but you can't have cars' tyres fail when they're going at 200 miles an hour down a straight. That's just asking for trouble. And luckily, both Verstappen and Stroll managed to walk away. I think my driver for today, it's got to be Sebastian Vettel, really. I did want to pick Perez because he did a good job. He did everything that was asked of him and more. He won the race. But Vettel, just coming from 11th place on the grid all the way up to 2nd, and the way he did it, it was just superb. I think he's got to be driver of the day, honestly. And bringing home Aston Martin's first podium as well. That's fantastic. Anyway, what's your thoughts on the race today? Did you find it as entertaining as I did? What are your thoughts on the tyre situation as well? That's a really interesting conversation I think people are going to be talking about for a little while. So let me know. Let me know in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.